Rumex crispus. Nickname for this plant is hot dartboard. This is part 1, and in part 2 I'll be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant. For identifying purposes, be sure to watch all of part 1 so that part 2 is understandable. This is a weedy plant. It can grow up to 5 feet tall, but it usually just grows around 3 feet tall. There is one or more erect stems which bolt from the center of these basal rosette of leaves, round, close to the ground. Notice that the leaves are curly, they're very wavy and twisted. Very distinguishing characteristic of this particular plant. The stems develop in the second year along with these cluster of flowers. The stems also develop leaves, which are more curly, twisted, and wavy than the basal rosette of leaves, those which are close to the ground and form in a circular pattern. The flowers are dull green, and they turn reddish at maturity. More specifically, the flowers turn into fruit, which then become a reddish brown. The flowers develop atop the stems. This is a picture of the fruit after the flowers have matured. Notice that there are some reddish brown spots throughout parts of these fruit developments. There's also a prominent egg-shaped bump on the back of each of these large sepals. There are no petals on this plant, but the sepals, which I will point out later, which there are 6, and each of the 3 large ones bears this prominent bump. It's got a corky texture and should not be confused with the seed which is inside. The stem is ribbed. Notice the longitudinal ribs here on the stem. It is hairless, like the leaves, and can be reddish. Notice this reddish color here, as well as reddish colors and spots along and throughout the leaves. There is an edible plant which is related to this one, which bears similar fruit, which actually have prominent teeth along the edges of these sepals here. But the edges of the plant we're studying now, the hot dartboard, is relatively smooth around the edges. Reddish to reddish brown tints, prominent egg-shaped bump, referred to as the blister in the mnemonic coming up in part 2, the memory technique. This picture shows us how the sepals develop. There are 3 smaller inner sepals and 3 outer sepals which develop a 3-winged shaped fruit. There are 3 wings on this one, and here as well. They whirl around the ribbed stem. The stems of each fruit are floppy, just as the flowers are before they mature to the stage. The flower or the leaf on the right would represent a leaf or a stem leaf, and the leaf on the left would represent a basal rosette leaf, which is closer to the ground, forms a circle. Here we see what has developed into the fruit, which has more of a reddish color associated with them, reddish brown. And here we see an inflorescence or a cluster of flowers, dull green, but there are reddish spots on this as well. Here we see a picture of the flowers. There are 3 styles. The anthers are yellow. Again, as it relates to a hot coming up in part 2, we see again the red or reddish association with this plant. These plants are more mature, and this gives us a good idea what we would find in the field. At a distance, you may see a number of mature plants or previous year's plants, but in this area you will also find newer plants or first year plants with the wavy, curly, and twisted leaves, which have not yet developed the stem, which are better for edibility purposes. The flowers, which turn into fruit, which turn a reddish brown with age. This picture also illustrates where the nickname is derived from: hot dartboard, for this resembles darts sticking from out of the ground. Going into a rosette of leaves. A mature plant here. Yellow anthers. 6 stamen, 3 small, 3 large. The prominent bump on the outside of each of the 3 stamen. The large stamen with each small stamen is what develops the 3-winged fruit. In the background, we see the twisted, curled, and wavy leaf. The leaf is lance-shaped, oblong. It usually has reddish spots on it. Oblong, lance-shaped. And there are 2 rounded lobes, almost like the top of a heart. At the base of each leaf. Each leaf has a stem, as you see. They are hairless and smooth. They have a sour taste. It can be up to 6 inches long and 1 inch across. This is a first year plant, the basal rosette of leaves. Ribbed stem. Like with all of the plant, it can bear reddish colors, blotches or spots, or its entirety, associated with the hot dartboard being featured in the mnemonic coming up in part 2. The stem has nodes, and each of the nodes are covered with a papery sheath. This picture shows us the transition between flower and fruit. See the flower closing up here, developing into the 3-winged fruit. Even at this stage and before, this plant is easily identifiable. The fruit at its maturity, reddish brown, prominent bumps on the outside of each of 3 large sepals, 2 small sepals as well, which help develop it. Picture is shown as a matter of contrast, or as far as you being able to tell the size of the fruit. They're very tiny. These are the seeds, which are inside. The seeds are referred to in botany as achenes. The seeds have a triangular cross section. They are approximately 1 millimeter wide and 2 millimeters tall. These achenes, being triangular in cross section, as I mentioned earlier, with the tiny seed inside. The achenes are smooth. They're reddish brown. Pointed at both ends. And are heart-shaped, like a heart-shaped little nutlet. The edible parts of this plant are the leaves, the root, and the seeds. To learn how to prepare these plants, visit survivalplantsmemorycourse.com and click on the Rumex crispus nickname for this, or click on the nickname for this plant, which is hot dartboard. Both are on the same link. This will be plant number 35. Thank you for watching. This has been part 1. And in part 2, I'll be sharing a mnemonic or memory technique to help you commit to memory the most distinguishing characteristics of this plant.